I did not, nor would I ever say that black people are apes, but it sure fucking sounded like that because I'm not racist. But whenever you're in a situation where you have to say, I'm not racist, you f***ed up. And I clearly have f***ed up.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Behavioral Arts. And this week we're looking at a video of Joe Rogan, who is of course the most listened to podcaster in the world. He's a comedian, he's an actor, he's a UFC announcer. And a couple of weeks ago, a video surfaced, which was a compilation of all the times he said the N-word, the racial slur, throughout the years. And he made a video in response to that where he thoroughly apologized and gave his thoughts on that whole topic. And that's the video we're looking at today. I'm going to talk about the body language, I'm going to talk about the choice of words, and you're going to have a chance to do your own analysis and form your own opinion as to whether or not you feel that this is an authentic apology. Before you look at this footage and form an opinion, I want to say something very important. You're about to see short clips from his apology video, but those edits, those cuts are mine. His video was a little over 5.5 minutes straight, no edits, and I think that's very important. I just took out little parts that I think are a little more telling, and that's what you're about to see. So take a look, try to see what you're noticing in what he's saying, in the way he's saying it, the body language, and form an opinion. Enjoy.
I'm making this video to talk about the most regretful and shameful thing that I've ever had to talk about publicly. There's a video that's out that's a compilation of me saying the N-word. It's a video that's made of clips taken out of context of me of 12 years of conversations on my podcast, and it's all smushed together, and it looks horrible, even to me. Now, I know that to most people, there's no context where a white person is ever allowed to say that word, never mind publicly on a podcast. And I agree with that now. I haven't said it in years, but for a long time, when I would bring that word up, like if it would come up in conversation, instead of saying the N-word, I would just say the word. I thought as long as it was in context, people would understand what I was doing. I was talking about how Quentin Tarantino used it repeatedly in Pulp Fiction, or I was talking about how a Netflix executive, ironically, used it because he was trying to compare it to another offensive word, and he said it out loud, and they fired him. It's a very unusual word, but it's not my word to use. I'm well aware of that now, but for years I used it. I never used it to be racist because I'm not racist, but whenever you're in a situation where you have to say, I'm not racist, you f***ed up. And I clearly have f***ed up. My sincere and humble apologies. I wish there was more that I could say, but all of this is just me talking from the bottom of my heart. It makes me sick watching that video.
Okay, so as always, it is time for your first impressions. So pause the video or go back and look at those clips again and scroll down to the comments and let me know what you think. Let me know, what are you feeling? Is this an authentic sentiment? Are you seeing actual guilt, actual remorse? Are you seeing moments of deception? Just give me what you're feeling. You could be as detailed or as broad as you want. You can even point out things and be like, I noticed this, but I'm not sure what it means. Totally up to you. Give me what you got in the comments. Now, before I jump into the analysis of the video, before I even look at 1 second of what he said, I want to talk about the setting, because very often the setting is really important and reflects what's going on in the person's mind. You'll notice he's not in his studio. He's not in any studio. And this is Joe Rogan we're talking about. He has access to the best sound equipment, the best video equipment in the world, but that's not what we're seeing here. It would have taken him minutes to call up a couple of his crew members and say, all right, let's go film this professional thing. That's not what happened. Looks like his house, he's got the library behind him, and it looks like it was just filmed on his phone. This means one of two things. Either he had something on his heart and he was like, I just have to get this out. So he grabs his phone and let's go. Or it was premeditated and he said, I don't want to do this big production. I just want to speak from the heart. And this is the way he was comfortable doing that. In either case, to me, that's one big point on the side of genuineness, that it kind of feels like he had something on his chest and he had to get it out. The second interesting thing about this goes back to what I said earlier. This is more than 5 minutes of him talking straight, no cuts, no edits. And that's really difficult to do if you don't believe in the thing you're talking about, because you would have to stop and do it in little segments and think about how am I really going to convey this and really think about your words. But it's very difficult for anyone to go 5 minutes like that about something they don't believe in. All right, now we're going to jump right into the actual clips and talk about some really interesting body language and verbal tells. But before we do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button, turn those notifications on for more amazing psychology content.
I'm making this video to talk about the most regretful and shameful thing that I've ever had to talk about publicly. There's a video that's out that's a compilation of me saying the N-word. It's a video that's made of clips taken out of context of me of 12 years of conversations on my podcast, and it's all smushed together, and it looks horrible, even to me.
Okay, so we're starting with some really good stuff right there in the beginning as he introduces the video. He starts by saying, I'm making this video to talk about the most regretful and shameful thing I've ever had to talk about publicly. Now, that's a powerful statement. First, it's an extreme, the most. He's not saying very or the most. He's putting a lot of importance on that. Then regretful and shameful. These are emotionally heavy words. Typically, when we have someone who's giving a fake apology or something they don't believe in, they're going to try to put psychological distancing there and say, I got to talk to you guys about this thing that happened, or hey guys, so there's a situation that I wanted to talk about. He is not backing away from this. He is saying like this is big and shameful. Just as he says that sentence, we see two fascinating things happen at the exact same time. One of them is called nostril flaring or wing dilation. This is when the nostrils open up like this, and we can even hear a deep breath through the nose. The second thing we see is a lip retraction. That's when the lips go in like that for a second. Now, the nostril flaring is not part of his baseline. If you watch this video or any of his videos, he rarely does that. The lip retraction is interesting. Every now and then before he starts a sentence, we see a really quick lip retraction, but it's a lot faster and less significant than this one. Let's talk about these two gestures starting with the nose. When we feel stressed or defensive or even angry, our body goes into fight or flight mode and the nostrils open up to get more oxygen. It's a defense mechanism. Lip retracting is typically when we have withheld opinion or disagreement. So think about how sometimes someone's talking about something and you want to say something but not really, so you might just kind of like hold it in, or you might do it when you're like, I shouldn't have said that. Basically when we're trying to hold back words. So what does this mean in this context? Well, it could mean a lot of things. First of all, it could simply be that he's about to talk about something very stressful, and that's what's happening. The lip retraction, like, it's hard to talk about as his body goes into stress and a little bit of defensiveness. He's feeling the emotional impact of what he's about to talk about. Second, it could simply be in his mind because he's thinking about something he really shouldn't have said. That word is not something he should have used. I think we all agree. So that could simply be, this is something I really shouldn't have said. Think about that. When you talk about something that you shouldn't have said, this is a very natural thing for your lips to do. And the nose opening, again, is a stress reactor. Finally, there's a slight possibility that this is relating to the fact that he just said, this is the most regretful and shameful thing I've ever had to talk about. And that's a bold, big statement. And he's doing that like sort of like, okay, maybe it's not the most shameful and regretful. Maybe there was some other stuff I had to talk about that rivaled this. So maybe there's a small chance that it relates to that, but I think more than likely it's just the overall stress of the topic. Then right at the end, he does something that I really love and I think psychologically is really powerful. And he goes, and it was all smushed together and it looked effing horrible. Let's start with that word, the word smushed. I love that choice of word. This is a man who works in media, one of the most successful people in the world. He knows the right word for that. It's cut, edited. There's a lot better words than smushed. But this is a comedian in him doing something that's served him very well throughout the years. By using such an informal, funny word like smushed, he's kind of relaxing the mood a little and creating rapport. He follows that by saying, it looked effing horrible, dropping that swear word there. And this is something he does quite often because we typically swear around people that we're comfortable with, people we know well. So using this sort of informal, almost funny word and that swear word creates an informal and comfortable atmosphere and immediately gains rapport with his audience.
Now, I know that to most people, there's no context where a white person is ever allowed to say that word, never mind publicly on a podcast. And I agree with that now, I haven't said it in years.
So really interesting what he says there right in the beginning. He says, to most people, it's not okay for white people to use this word in any context. It's interesting that he says to most people. The most direct way to say that sentence would be, it's not okay for white people to use that word under any context. I think the reason he's saying to most people is just to throw a little bit of doubt at this. To maybe say, you know, this is not something we should be saying, but there are some people out there who believe that under certain contexts, it's not the most demonic thing. Then he says something that further strengthens my position on this, which is when he says, I agree with that now. That now is very important. It lets us know that something happened, whether it was a conversation or reflection that he had, that made him realize that it's wrong. That before, he was part of that small demographic of people who thought it was okay in certain contexts. Remember when he said most people, not all people? So I used to be part of that. So I think he was setting that up, like there's this small demographic who thinks it's okay. I was part of that, and I'm not anymore. Look, I listen to a lot of Joe Rogan stuff. I often disagree with what he says, but there's one thing about him that's pretty consistent, and that's when he disagrees with someone, he doesn't go on the attack. He doesn't try to belittle them. He's very open-minded. He's an advocate for free speech, and I think that's where he is with this. It's like, I'm on this side of the line now. There was a time where I wasn't, and I wouldn't necessarily destroy someone for not being here with me now.
But for a long time, when I would bring that word up, like if it would come up in conversation, instead of saying the N word, I would just say the word. I thought as long as it was in context, people would understand what I was doing.
Right there, we see the number one cluster of body language that convinces me that there was real reflection here and regret and change in his position. So first he's talking about the context in which he did use that word. Then he says, instead of saying the N word, I just used the word itself. Then as he says the next sentence, I thought that if it was in context, people would get what I was doing. As he's saying that sentence, we see a bunch of things happen simultaneously. First, we see a slow blink. The eyes close as the eyebrows come down. Not quite in that anger position, but they do come down almost on their way there. Then the head is shaking a little like this. And the biggest sign here is we see one line on one side of the nose here. So his left, our right, we see that one line. There is one universal human emotion that is asymmetric, just one, and it's contempt. Every other emotion, as we experience it, there's symmetry in the face. Contempt, when we feel contemptuous or we look down on someone else or ourselves, there's a bit of a triangle here of the lip that pops up. I can't even fake it like this. And it causes one line on one side of the nose over here. His doesn't quite pop up from here. It's more the corner of the mouth that causes it. But you can clearly see this sort of contempt as he's got his eyes closed and he's doing this when he's talking about what he thought at the time. If you really look at that, you can see it. It's quick, it's fleeting, but you can see this sort of I was a big idiot and I can't believe I thought that.
Just say the word. I thought as long as it was in context.
You can almost feel him rolling his eyes under going, that was not right. And to me, that's really important.
How Richard Pryor used it as one of the titles of one of his albums. I was talking about how Quentin Tarantino used it repeatedly in Pulp Fiction. Or I was talking about how a Netflix executive, ironically, used it because he was trying to compare it to another offensive word, and he said it out loud, and they fired him.
Here he's explaining the situations in which he used it, and there's a bit of a justification tone to this. Because I used it in that context, maybe it's not that bad. But I don't even think he thinks it's a good justification. I think it's just him going, I just want you to know that's how I used it, and it's up to you to decide if you think that that's a little more acceptable. Right there at the end, as he's talking about a Netflix executive who was fired for using the word while talking about the gravity of the word and comparing it to another word like it, we see something really telling. His eyes open up like this as he puts that emphasis, and he was fired as he sort of moves towards the camera with a sort of emphasis with the chin. That's surprise. I think there's a part of him who's shocked that this guy was fired. I think he gets it. He's like, I'm on this side of the line now. I totally understand this isn't a word that should be used, but there's still an element of, I don't think someone should be fired from a job like that for making the same mistake that I once made. There's real surprise with that decision. Also, as he's saying that about the Netflix executive, we see a very clear eye flutter. This is not part of his baseline. It doesn't happen much. And eye flutter is when we like blink a couple of times in quick succession. And it happens when we're having a hard time processing information, whether it's something we're hearing and we're having a hard time processing it, or we're having a hard time getting our words together to say something. Basically, the brain is slowing down a little as it's trying to process, and we get this eye flutter going on. This just further emphasizes for me that he's having a hard time with this guy losing that job for making something that is basically a mistake, one that he himself made. Another thing we're seeing in this clip, in fact, throughout this entire video, is raised eyebrows. Almost the entire time in this video, his eyebrows are raised. Now, for those of you who watch videos of Joe Rogan when he's interviewing, this is not common for him. Most of the time when he's talking, he's actually pretty still. His body language is a little low like this, and his eyebrows are actually very sort of flat and low. Even in times where he's talking or saying something where most of us would use the eyebrows like this, he does not. So this is a deviation from baseline in this video. There are generally 3 reasons we raise our eyebrows. The first one is surprise or fear or shock. So something happens and everything opens up. So not just the eyebrows, the whole, like we jump back, the whole face opens up and then it slowly subsides. So it doesn't look quite like that. The second one is innocence. So the same way we throw our hands up like this, and notice how as a reflex, my eyebrows also went up as I did that, because our eyes are very telling. We use them to communicate a lot of thought. And the same way we show, look, there's nothing in my hands, it's also, look, I'm not hiding anything. So this is why, display of innocence. And finally, the third one is when we're seeking approval. Like think about bumping into an old friend at the airport and you go, hey, how are you? Hey, good to see you. It's like, look at this, connection, we're connecting. I believe that the reason his eyebrows are up there for a lot of this video is reasons 2 and 3. First, innocence. I think he's like, I'm honestly sorry about this. And he's trying to just show himself, put himself on display. And second, that he's seeking approval from his audience to accept this apology that he is providing.
A black person can use it and it could be a punchline. It could be a term of endearment. It could be lyrics to a rap song. It could be a positive affirmation. It's a very unusual word, but it's not my word to use. I'm well aware of that now, but for years I used it.
Not much to analyze there. He's talking about the intricacy of the word, but I love what he says. He says, it's not my word to use, and I love that, and I couldn't agree more. This is a word that affects an entire demographic of people, and I don't think that white people can quite understand that impact. And to me, it's as easy to not say the word as it is to say the word. So if something you're saying is really going to hurt or affect a big demographic of people, why say it in the first place? So I completely agree with him. Not that my opinion matters on this subject at all. I just really like that he said that. To me, it felt like it was really coming from the heart, and he gets that. There's also a good amount of accountability there where he's saying, I used it for years. Again, there's no psychological distancing. He's not trying to make excuses for it. He's not trying to justify it. Earlier, there was a bit of justifications about the context, but he's not hiding from it. He's like, you got me, I used it. And as he's saying, I know that now, like I know that it's not my word to use now, there's this big emphasis moment where we see the inner corners of the eyebrows go up like this as he says that. This is very hard to fake. It's not an easy thing, and it happens when we're sad or sorry or we're feeling regret or remorse. This happens, usually with sadness, and it feels very real to me. And yeah, his eyes are closed as he's saying it, and a lot of the times I say eye blocking does come with deception or stress, but it also comes with emphasis. Like I get it, and sadness and regret. That all makes sense and is consistent to me with this real moment of sorrow.
I never used it to be racist because I'm not racist, but whenever you're in a situation where you have to say, I'm not racist, you f***ed up. And I clearly have f***ed up.
I love that part, honestly, and I laughed the first time I saw it. And there's a really great bit of psychology there that I'll come right back to, but I want to start once again with the accountability thing. He is volunteering a piece of information that I hadn't thought about. He's going, I'm not racist, but if you have to say that, well, clearly you messed up. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, that's actually a really good point. He volunteered that. So once again, He's not trying to mitigate it. He's not trying to like back up from it or distance from it. He's owning up and going, if I have to say that, clearly I messed up. So again, for me right there, 10 on 10 for accountability. But psychologically speaking, he's doing something there that's really interesting. And I think this was just a reflex because he's an entertainer, he's a public speaker, and it's a pronoun shift. And it's a really interesting one. This video is about him. It's about what he did. The way to say that sentence that would make the most logical sense would be to say, I'm not a racist, but if I have to say that, I messed up. But he doesn't. He said, if you have to say that, you messed up. He's bringing us into this. And I think this is, once again, as his experience as a comedian, it's making us go, yeah, you know what, that's a good point. If I had to say that, it means I messed up as well. And it gets us to think about, he's humanizing this. So he's relating it to us. And with that pronoun shift, we're connecting more to this position, to this difficult position that he's in. And we're going, yeah, I get it. That makes sense. Another really fascinating thing about the body language, and I'm actually quite happy about, is that his thumb somehow made it into the video. I don't know why it's there, but I'm happy that it is because we're seeing his illustrators. Illustrators are gestures that we make to emphasize what we're saying. And when we are being truthful and speaking from the heart and honest, our illustrators are synced with what we're saying. So as I speak, I say this and I say that because it's honest. In deception or in being dishonest, our illustrators are out of sync. We might say something and then emphasize. That pisses me off because what's happening in the brain is like you say something, then your brain goes, no, really drive it home. So we have this illustrator. And there's so much going on in our head that our gestures and our words fall out of sync. Throughout this entire video, if you look at that thumb, it's almost perfectly synchronized with what he's saying. It's moving with perfect precision with his words. Even his head, when he's emphasizing those things, even right there at the end, as he's saying it's not okay. We're seeing these gestures as he speaks to the camera, and it's all synchronized. It's all one fluid thought. So at the very least, there's a lot of honesty and truthfulness coming in through those gestures. So I've never done this before, but as I was editing, I noticed a part of his video that I had glossed over because my focus in my analysis was about the use of the N-word, and there's another part that I kind of didn't pay much attention to, but it's really important. And he's talking about this story from like 11 years ago when he went to the movies, and turns out he was in an all-black neighborhood. He went to see Planet of the Apes, and he compared the neighborhood to Planet of the Apes, and that's just really not a good look. So he addressed it, and there's a lot going on here, so I'm throwing that in. Take a look.
And I said, we got out, and it was like we were in Africa. It's like we were in Planet of the Apes. I did not, nor would I ever say that black people are apes, but it sure fucking sounded like that. And I immediately afterwards said, that's a racist thing to say. I was just saying there's a lot of black people there. But then I went on to talk about what a positive experience it was and how much fun it was to go to see this movie in a black neighborhood. Taken out of context, it looks terrible, but it looks terrible even in context. It's a fucking idiotic thing to say. And I was just trying to be entertaining. I certainly wasn't trying to be racist. And I certainly would never want to offend someone for entertainment with something as stupid as racism.
Okay, so I want to start with what he said right there at the end. I was just trying to be entertaining. I was certainly not trying to be racist. For me, those two things are not mutually exclusive. It's possible to try to be entertaining and try to be racist at the same time. Anyone who ever tells a racist joke is attempting those two things simultaneously. So personally for me, I was trying to be entertaining is not a valid counter argument to someone being racist or trying to be racist. On the other hand, I do like the fact that he's using the word trying. So he's not saying I was being entertaining, I wasn't being racist. He's saying I was trying to be entertaining. Therefore, he acknowledges that it probably wasn't that entertaining. And then he says, I wasn't trying to be racist. In other words, yeah, it definitely looked that way. Like, I get that that was racist. And he goes on to say that. That was a racist thing to say. I just wasn't trying to be racist. That wasn't the attempt. I don't think it excuses it. I don't think he thinks it excuses it. In his language, he's definitely very firm on the fact that that was a really dumb thing to say. He reiterates that multiple times. But even in the body language and some of the verbal tells here, we see that his opinion on this is a lot more conclusive and a lot more that was completely unacceptable than the use of the N-word. Because first of all, remember how we talked about lip retraction? We see that same gesture again, which is a sign of stress. It is a sign of, I really shouldn't have said that. And he's thinking about like, yeah, that was a bad thing to say, disagreement. So he disagrees with that former self. We're also seeing right in the beginning, towards the end of his sentence, he says,
I was just saying, there's a lot of black people there.
I was just saying, there's a lot of black people there. So you notice right at the end of that sentence, he speeds up and he kind of mutters that end as his tone goes down. And this is very rare for his baseline. Usually he slows down at the end of a sentence as his voice gets louder to really emphasize these points. That's typically the way he drives points home. But here he kind of mutters that end as it jumbles away and the voice just kind of fades. He knows there's no excuse. And this is why he's sort of muttering that end, and then he immediately redirects instantly. And this is something that has probably served him well in the past. He starts talking about, I went on to say, you know, how much of a great time we had and how great it was. So we have this sort of muttering and just kind of like getting past that and then kind of focusing on the positivity. So yeah, there's a lot of body language and verbal tells here that demonstrate he definitely knows that this was very wrong. So what is my conclusion of this whole analysis? Well, as I said, I don't always agree with Joe Rogan. In fact, there are times where I highly disagree with Joe Rogan. I don't think that this is a word that he should have used. But as a behavior analyst, I am not judge or jury. It is not my job to analyze the ethics here, but the behavior. So from a behavior standpoint, I have to separate myself from my opinions on the matter and just look at that body language and the choice of words. And if I look at only that, I think we're seeing a lot of real reflection here, a lot of honesty, a lot of strong opinions, and a real shift, a real change of opinion where he's looking at the camera and there are moments in this where he's almost teaching the viewers like, this is wrong. You should not say this word. It's not my word to use. To where he's saying, if you're like me, like how I thought that there was a context that made this okay, it's not. So he's like really, it's not just a shift. It's like now he's really against that word. And ultimately, I think the most important thing is I don't believe he will be using the word anymore. And isn't that the most important thing here? I think it is. I hope it is. So guys, I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this video, and I will see you on the next one.